In this video, I'm going to be covering the best way to learn programming as a security professional, right? On the offensive side of security, of course. So if that sounds interesting, stay tuned. So the first thing that we need to keep in mind when it comes to learning programming as a security professional is that first and foremost, we are not developers, right? We're not software developers. And we gotta really focus in on that because there's a key distinction between what a software developer would do and what a security professional would do, right? There's different use cases for code, basically, right? So if you're going to be a software developer, let's just point out the distinctions, right? If you're going to be a software developer, you're going to need to be able to create code that is used by, hundreds, in some cases, thousands or even millions of users, right? So you're going to need to make sure that the end product is something that is very, hardened to being broken, right? Because assume that the user could enter any kind of data in, right? Expect the unexpected. You got to be able to handle every case, right? Every situation. What if a user does this? What if a user does that? And what if a company buys this and they're trying to use it in their production environment, right? There's so many things that come into play for software developers, and that's going to change what they need to know with code in order to be successful. But when you're talking about doing this as a security professional, and keep in mind that security professionals can dip their toes over in the software development space, right? How many times have you downloaded, perhaps some kind of script off of GitHub that was kind of commercialized and maybe even became its own big product, right? Like if you look at things like, PowerShell Empire and, some of these C2 frameworks and different tools that you might use, whether it be PowerShell tools, like the PowerView stuff and all that. Well, that pretty much is what went from a project that was just, it probably started out, a lot of those probably just started out as a script that someone needed, and then they ported it over with the idea in mind that, thousands of people are going to be using this. And so that changed the way they'd have to develop versus if they were just writing a quick and dirty script for themselves. Now, when we talk about programming from the perspective of purely that security, offensive security angle, right? Oftentimes we're just running scripts that only we're going to touch. No one else is going to use it. Maybe a few other people on our team are going to use it at some point, but for the most part, we're not going to have to worry about a lot of the different situations that a software developer would need to concern themselves with. So we want to be very pragmatic in our approach to learning programming. So that allows us to focus more on the scripting side of things rather than the software development side of things, right? Writing quick and dirty scripts, like you guys probably wrote bash scripts before and things like that. Kind of doing the same kind of approach, and that's why Python is so popular, right? But taking that same approach, but using a full-on programming language like maybe Python, maybe Go, which is a language that's become a lot more popular in recent years. Just writing those scripts, kind of scripting out what you need to do, but what inputs to send to the application because you built the application, right? And you don't have to worry about those edge cases of, what if the user passes it this instead of that, right? Because only you or your team is going to be using it. But no matter what, side of the fence you're on, software developer or, security professional, when you have absolutely zero knowledge of this stuff, you're going to have to start out by going through some tutorials, finding some resources. And when it comes to finding resources and using those, the first thing I would say is, the year is 2021 right now. Anything you want to learn as far as programming is concerned, you can find it for free on the internet. And especially if you're looking at some of the newer tools, the newer technologies out there, I should say, oftentimes the online free documentation is going to be better than any kind of paid version. One example I would give is Rust, right? Rust is a language that has excellent documentation, as a lot of these newer technologies often do. And Rust documentation is known as the book. That's what everyone calls it. All the Rustians, they call it the book. And it's basically a large document on pretty much anything you need to know for the language, including some examples and things you can work through. So that is the best starting point. You can look on Udemy for courses or little tutorials out there, but from all the reviews and stuff I've seen online is that you're better off starting with the book if you want to learn Rust, right? And so I think you can pretty much apply that same approach to any language. Python, you can find free resources out there to learn Python. You don't need to buy a Python book, right? And similarly for these other languages as well. But no matter where you start out, right, it's very important that if you want to learn this stuff as efficiently as possible, it's very important that as soon as you have a basic grasp of things, maybe even before you think you're ready, because if you wait till you're ready, you might not ever think that you're ready, right? So one of the issues that I see a lot of people run into in learning coding, right, is that they do the initial step of, finding the resources and doing tutorials and things like that. But then they get stuck in what a lot of developers call tutorial hell. So you don't want to be stuck in the place where all you're doing is doing tutorials and copying other people's code. As soon as possible, actually as soon as you possibly can, I really mean this, you need to go off on your own and create something outside of any kind of tutorial out there, because that is going to teach you more than pretty much anything else can, right? We talk about OSCP on this channel. What makes OSCP so great? It's the hands-on nature of having to do this stuff, right? You can spot out those people like a sore thumb in the security industry, the people that know all the theory in the world, but they couldn't get a shell to save their lives, right? You don't want to make the same mistake in coding where, you're just reading books cover to cover, you're doing tutorials, and you know the theory of the programming language, but you can't actually build stuff on your own. And that's what's fun about programming. That's the cool part, is you get to actually build stuff from scratch. I say from scratch, right? You're going to be using a lot of libraries, other people's code, of course, but just going from idea to a tangible digital piece of software that does something that is useful to you, it's really awesome. There's not many things as cool as that, in my opinion, and definitely something that could help you out on OSCP as you can automate some of your work. And really where this can shine for you as a security professional is just how it allows you to automate certain parts of your workflow so that you can put more time, focus, and energy into finding those big critical vulnerabilities. So one of the things that I say a lot on this channel, right? Learn things on an as-needed basis. When it comes to programming, that phrase could not apply anymore, honestly, because there's so many different rabbit holes you could go down in when it comes to coding, right? Like a programming language, pretty much any language, has so many features, so much stuff that it can do. And if you just go at it cover to cover and you don't really pick out your own, get started on your own project, what's going to happen is you're going to learn a little bit about a lot of stuff, but you're not going to be able to retain that information because it's not meaningful to you. When you go off on your own and start trying to complete some kind of coding project, it will put everything in context, and everything you learn will have a purpose. And because you're learning things with that purpose in mind, it'll be a lot easier to retain that information, because you're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember when I know how to use this library. I remember I used it for this specific purpose in this project. And trust me, it's going to be a lot easier to remember this stuff. With that being said, all programmers, all developers, I don't care how good they are, they look up stuff, right? They look up stuff a lot. They use Google, Stack Overflow, the documentation for whatever library they're working with. So don't be afraid to look things up, and don't be afraid to feel a little bit out of your element and to feel like the project you undertook is a little bit over your head, over your capabilities of where you're currently at. as long as it's not too far above, and you can be a little bit generous with how far above you reach, but as long as it's not too far out of your range of capabilities, you'll be able to eventually get through that project, and you will learn so much more than if you just spent all that time doing tutorials. I absolutely guarantee you of that. And another thing is with the projects, pick something that's useful and interesting to you, right? There's so many cool project ideas out there. I would say if you are coming from a pretty starter point, maybe you just learn the basics of programming in your given language, I would say go off and learn about APIs, because that's where some of the coolest, most useful programming aspects of programming can come into play. Is when you're working with APIs, you're pulling in data from external sources and you're performing some kind of logic on that data. You can really build some cool, real-world, useful applications. So that's just a little tip here to get you started if you're unsure of where to go from here. But I hope this video was of help to you guys. I definitely wish I would have known this stuff when I started learning coding. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know down in the section below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. If you watched to this point in the video and you enjoyed it, definitely smash that like button, subscribe it to the channel, help get this message out there. And I'll see you in the next videos. I got some Python videos over here if you're interested in those as well. I'll see you right over in those videos. Thanks for watching.